Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Jenny Pearson. I'm an Education Officer for the Primary Health Network. Before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today and pay respect to Elders past, present and emerging. I'm coming to you from Enewan land in the Northern Tablelands. And we've got a lovely day today. It's actually over 10 degrees, so I'm very happy with that. You will see in the chat box, I have put a link to the evaluation at the end of the webinar. If you could please fill it out, it will only take you a minute at the most. We will use the chat box today. There is a Q&A as well, but I think it just gets a little bit confusing. So let's stick with the chat box. And we will be running a poll during the webinar. So it will be great to get your feedback on that. I think that is all you need to hear from me. We have our presenters, Martin McKenzie and Chris Morton, and we've also got Lauren Davidson here, who is from the Primary Health Network, and she's in our emergency response team. All right, so our first presenter today is Martin, and Martin, I will let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jenny. My name's Martin McKenzie. I'm from the Business Centre based here in Newcastle, but we have a patch that sort of goes up to mid-Coast, down to Hawkesbury and out to Denman. So we've got a fairly big footprint. We're a not-for-profit based here, and we mainly work in that small business space, also an RTO. I'm very honoured to be asked here by PHN to do a presentation on business continuity. It's not really dark magic. It's just a bit of a suggestion for a plan. So I might just start to share screen, and you can all let me know if you've got any questions along the way. Happy to field them either in the chat or vocally. Lauren, is it okay if I field questions on the run? Okay, great. Okay, everyone got that? I'm about 17 slides ahead.
Yep, looks great.
Yeah, like I'm doing a test, like I actually meant to do that. That's very nice. All right, so you've got the intro, you know how I am, so I've called this the plan for where everything hits the fan. Take what that you will. So just to add to Jenny's acknowledgement, I'm on a combination of what we call a Worimi country. Place name for our office is a place called Mullumbimba, just near the harbour in Newcastle. This is what we're going to try to cover today. We're going to see why it's important, why do we need to even think about business continuity, identifying what disruption means for a business, the situational awareness that's part of that. We're going to see what information we need to check off on before we do any of that planning stuff, then the planning and a couple of helpful resources, if you find them helpful. So the business continuity what is it in terms of why do we need to have it? It's basically just so if something does happen, whether it be a disruption, natural disaster, anything that we're going to call a disruption, which we'll look at in a minute, is how we're going to keep our business going as if nothing had happened, or at least continue what part of the business can we keep going on. To have a plan on this, it's not an evacuation plan. It's not a mandate that's required you to have a plan for compliance. It's basically a business safety net. Interestingly, though, we've noticed that particularly in allied health, where sometimes when there is disruption, the allied health will find themselves on the front line. They've also got to realise that half the time they're being impacted themselves as well. So just remember that. I did this one, sorry, Lauren, I did this one in Central Coast. And so, this guy's from Newcastle. He's going to talk about the earthquake and how it's probably the only city in the world that's had an earthquake, like ever. We don't own earthquakes, but everyone likes to talk about earthquakes. So that was like in 1989, and we still talk about it. But if you think about it in broader terms, in New South Wales, there's been 43, when I last did this presentation, now 48 earthquakes in this year alone. Yes, most of those you don't feel, but it's just how many earthquakes we actually have continually, including a sort of semi-recent one that a lot of people felt through a lot of New South Wales. Inside that, everyone's probably well aware of the amount of declared events that we've had, including very recently. So that's in a total of 9 months. That's 34 declared events of all different kinds: bushfire, cyclone, flood events, storm events, high winds, etc., including my house. So this is a lovely gum tree up the front of my house. And that's just an example of what can happen. Consider I work from home. That would have been certainly a workplace or a business continuity issue if I was squished. But certainly you just got to expect the unexpected, like potentially this is something and this is at the very, very cutting edge of my IT skills in terms of graphics, but this is Godzilla parked in the middle of Gosford CBD as well, that really sometimes you just don't know what to expect or what's even around the corner. So the idea is to put something in place. Okay, so what kind of disruptions are we looking at? So firstly, what at least are the inward disruptions that can happen? Now I've got 2 points here that sort of back onto each other. One is staff. Staff planned, either missing, either going through a holiday that something's been planned or unplanned. Locally, we call that lotto proof, or something else has happened, misadventure, whatever you want to call it. The second point is that transfer of knowledge. So when that staff isn't present in the workplace, what happens to all the knowledge that that person has had over the years, based on all the systems and all the knowledge in the particular practice that they have? Has there been any transfer of knowledge from that person? So that one that actually happens a lot in business is probably more impactful than you think. So something that can happen at any time, really. So we have to be prepared for that. Tech failure is a big one. So both hardware and software. So server going boom, all the software glitches that we have, and we all use a lot of layered platforms inside that. A lot of them are also sort of linked. Could there be a client incident where there might be something, an act of either a violence or very sick patient would disrupt the rest of the practice if it was in situ? Or has there been some sort of compliance issue as well, which can be equally disruptive, particularly in the health space? Now, the ones that we don't have control of, or a little bit broader than that, are obviously the ones that we all know. Yes, fire, flood, storm, earthquake. I've also put in there terrorism and vandalism because they're actually listed on the federal site for disaster. Tech failures are still really big, and if they're out of your control, that can be really, really frustrating. And communications and power, sometimes they happen at the same time, and major road closures or a combination of all of those points as well. The main ones I've seen over the years are these four. It's staff not being able to travel either to their work or to where they're supposed to be servicing clients. That's probably the biggest one. The next one straight underneath that is clients can't get in to where they need to be served, either to the practice or the business or whatever it is, or even travel around at all. Supply chain is next. And that power and communications disruption, doesn't matter whether it's localised or broader, is still the main impact inside that one. Very recent example where we had an area in Port Stephens that was without power. All of the businesses that relied on their POS and their platforms didn't have any communications at all. And that was like that for quite a few days. So even though it was just a storm event that might not be near you or you weren't physically impacted, if the system goes down, that's what hurts the most. So we need to get some situational awareness first. And even though I've got some dot points and check off some what you might need to gather, some of you might already have this in play, which is good. You sort of actually try to need to get at least a good collection of names, both inside and outside, that will be able to activate a plan or any actions that you need. So inside, who's who does what inside your business, listing out the assets as much as you can, including any really crucial or vital equipment that you might have, staff, including volunteers that you have, their private and work numbers if they have them, any remote staff that you have that aren't in situ, that are actually working remotely, contacts and their physical locations. We need utility providers and the IT contacts, bank contacts, and professional services. If you're using them internally, that's okay. But if they're outsourced, we need those contacts. The accountant is going to be a really important one, and the bookkeeper. So those outside links are a little bit broader. Now, I've mentioned down here, obviously, the last point, the accountant and the bank, again, on purpose, because they're going to be fairly crucial into doing business going forward, as is the IT part. So any of the key stakeholder contacts that you have, particularly if you're dealing with a government org or another provider or an NGO, you need to have all those stakeholder contacts. Local suppliers that are both local and non-local. So you've got alternatives in there potentially that you should be able to list. Government program contacts, of course, any local trades that deal with utilities. Outside comms and the information provision of that. One I've mentioned is the physical location of neighbours. I think it's always really important to be aware of where you are on a map and where you sit physically and who your immediate neighbours are, and make sure that you've got alternative arrangements. And that's a two-way relationship that can be quite handy if things go south and a lot. And on top of that, once you layer over a precinct, you get to work out where things are that are around you, where are the local high areas, where are the local services, where are any exit routes that are normally non-flood prone, that type of thing. So you can actually work out a fair bit from just jumping on a Google map and finding out where you actually sit on the map and what's around you. Now, the situational awareness, if you don't walk away with anything else today, I just want you to consider these three main points. First of all, what is your core business? What is it that you do? Underneath that, what do you need to restore immediately? And there might be things that you can park in some sort of, I guess, a list going downwards of importance, but you really have to identify what that most important thing is, your core business. On top of that, what are the resources to deliver those? And you've got to identify those items and the supply chain and any alternatives that you can gather up as well, and what the contingency is. So those sort of 3 points, if you walk away with nothing else, that's what you need to consider. And if you haven't identified what that core business is, it's probably a good place to start. I've worked up a bit of I guess, what you call a flow chart of what this might look like. And when you sort of start to activate, so disruption occurs, and then there's a triaging thing where you start to assess and work out what parts of the business are going to be impacted, and if there's going to be any impact at all. And if there's no, well, you don't activate the plan, but you do monitor the situation, and you keep going back to that triage space. If it's yes, the plan is activated. The key actions are inside that continuity plan, and you take steps to manage that. Now, the disruption ends and stand down the plan, but if back in that middle square where it says take steps to manage the disruption, while you're coordinating the business response to get back on your feet, someone inside your business has to be looking at what's going on with the actual initial disruption. So there's two parts to that. Who's tackling the initial disruption and who's tackling the approach to the business to get it back on its feet. Now, the next part is a sort of a flow chart, really a small map in a sequence. It's too small to look at. So Lauren has a copy of this, which he will send around. So I've broken it down into its elements. And this is what the plan should look like and what it should try and cover off on. So a place to identify what the disruption is and what the scale of it is, or at least a guide to do that. Then there's that triage, and that's to identify the trauma points. And just in that point, I promise I didn't make this sound allied health appropriate with these terms. This is how we talk about it. So identify the trauma points on the business. And straight underneath that is there, in the current world, are there any places where the business would be vulnerable as well? So if you overlay the trauma points on the business with any vulnerabilities at the current, they're the two things that you really have to sort of weigh up pretty quickly. Now, there's a stay or go situation here, which is probably more related to being physical, right? So where do you stay in the same location or do you go? Now, hopefully in that plan, you'll probably could consider some sort of alternate location or locations, and then communicating that both inwards and outwards, so to staff and any clients that you're going to use to deliver that with as well. So there's a problem space in here as well. So which problem space is it? Is it your clients? Is it yours or your clients, or is it both? So they need to be approached separately. In that solution space, that's where you need to look at that client space and do it with empathy. With the internal one, with your problem, it's with empathy to your staff as well to consider that. So working out that solution, you have to consider the bags of meat and bones called people inside that. And then you link back to the identified contacts as well. Now, the business model might need adjustment or changing in some way. So how do we do that? Now, in some cases, depending on what type of practice you've got inside allied health, it might be a really quick, easy model to switch back online. Not always possible, depending on what you're involved in. So that might be a quick and easy way to do it. If you can't do that, what are the alternatives? So inside that, you've got to measure and track the efficiencies of that particular model. Then communicate that out to, again, internally and to the clients as best you can, depending on what the disruption's given you, and then monitor and adjust inside that. So we're sort of looking at, I guess, a step-by-step way to do that. There's an action plan here that I've sort of laid out that you can do, but it's more of a reactive plan. So inside that plan, there's basically everything I've just laid out and some guidance text. And then on the other side, there's basically free text, fillable if you wish. Now, if you don't like that template, particularly for this group, I've actually built a Word document, which is a little bit more formal, I guess, and a bit more step-by-step in what you call, I guess, a sequence. And people might be more comfortable with that one. So Lauren's going to pass that round after the presentation. You can brand it up, you can change it and move it around. It's not etched in stone, and you can use that. You're free to use that as much as you like. A couple of things that I probably should also suggest that you have, and your staff have, are a couple of apps. Now, the New South Wales Hazards Near Me app is really invaluable, and it covers off on most of those hazards that we just talked about as terms of natural disasters, so fire, flood, storm, that type of thing as well. The BOM, there's lots of weather apps out there, but some people prefer the BOM because it's a government one, so therefore safe, but there are other quite natty ones out there. As long as it's giving you the local conditions, that's the main thing. And another good one, particularly for those road closures and alternate routes, is the Live Traffic app. Please don't use Google Maps. Sometimes it just doesn't refresh quickly enough to current conditions, and we've had people in trouble. My partner works in a government department that deals a lot in that space, and they're having people report back to them that say, oh no, this road's open, and when it's not, because there's been a landslip and there's no road there at all. So don't rely on Google Maps if you can possibly avoid it. Try and use something that's getting updated regularly and constantly all the time. To help with that, some of the offer here is, as part of Business Connect, we can offer businesses, including yourselves here, 8 hours of free business advice under the Business Connect program, which is state government funded. So if you're looking at the annoying task of having to write yet another plan or approach and you want help, I'm certainly here to offer that. And certainly my details can be passed around by Lauren and Jenny if you so wish. So that is me. Thank you for listening. I hope you found that okay. And it was very fast. Is everybody there?
Yes, we're still here. Sorry,
Yep.
I was looking for my button, my mute button.
Oh, so
yes.
Okay, great. I'm glad it was your fault, Jenny, and not mine.
Yes, it went very well. Thank you very much, Martin.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, I believe it's your turn.
Thank you. All righty, I will just have a crack at sharing a window here. There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Yep, fantastic. Alrighty. So, look, thanks once more for having me along. Looking forward to discussing a few of these items. So, a few things that I wanted to go through today. So, firstly, just to provide a little bit of background and context, I'm not a business continuity or disaster management or risk management expert, but I guess these are all things that I've had direct experience of over the years. And so whilst I might not be an expert, I can certainly share a bit of insight about some of the mistakes that we've made over the years, and hopefully you guys can avoid repeating them. Want to talk a little bit about business continuity planning and risk management. Ours is probably more, we use more a risk management approach, I suppose, to execute our business continuity planning, but I'll show you what that looks like. Recap just again for a bit of context around some times that we've found ourselves in a tight spot and what we've learned. Trying to understand a bit about some of the challenges faced by people in the audience, and then, as I alluded to earlier, sort of show a little bit of information around our process and how that works. Hopefully that helps. So look, just by way purely of background and context, so we're an allied health business. We're kind of divided into three main buckets, I suppose. So a clinic with a variety of allied health and medical disciplines, workplace services, delivering services to organisations, and then we also develop a range of fairly sort of niche technologies to support the delivery of a bunch of those workplace services. So business continuity planning. Now I've got to acknowledge when this topic was sort of first raised, I was initially a little bit reluctant because I didn't see myself as an expert or necessarily someone who'd have a whole lot to add, because I had in my head that business continuity planning you know, was this giant manual that would get dusted off in case of a disaster. And you know, and hopefully the content in that manual would fit whatever scenario you'd found yourself in. But I think where we're at now, and why I'm a bit more comfortable presenting some of this stuff, is that that's not necessarily how we think. It's not necessarily how health professionals tend to think either. You know, particularly allied health, we're pretty big on promoting prevention over cure, and it's certainly our approach to have a really sort of risk management or risk prevention approach. Still being prepared for the worst, you know, should it happen, but being prepared means not just assuming that it won't and scrambling to recover when bad things do happen, but hopefully being able to identify those risks in advance and actually mitigate the event from happening, or mitigate the impact of the event should it happen. So just to provide a bit of context, so I've been with the business for more than 15 years, closer to 20 now, and this is not a competition. I'm sure lots of people who are listening have had similar challenges. But when I was sitting down last week and thinking about, well, you know, what are all the times where we've found ourselves in a tight spot? We had a merger, that was always difficult. We've had a bunch of shareholder entries and exits. We've had loads of employee entries and exits. I think like any relationship, you want to part on good terms, but you can't have 120 sort of ins and outs without having a couple of tricky situations. We had a pretty significant economic downturn where we went from 52 staff down to 17. That was a business continuity threat. Off the back of that, we were lumped with a $200,000 payroll tax bill based on some incorrect accounting advice. We've had to defend some complaints to the Healthcare Complaints Commission that were shown to be vexatious from a very large competitor who was a bit upset that we were taking some of their work. Now, as I said, we successfully defended those. They were found to be vexatious in nature, but it cost us an absolute fortune to defend. At COVID, which obviously everyone's dealt with, I had a senior manager's computer that got hacked, and our premises got sold to a developer, and there was a clause hidden in the lease that extinguished our lease pretty much on the spot. So, look, lots of ups and downs. I think that's kind of part and parcel of running a business and running a health business for that matter, where your margins perhaps aren't always the most secure, but lots of learnings as well. So when I think about the stuff that we've learned over the years, and I think, you know, at the time it was bitter experience, and now it's probably more valued experience. I think the key things for us always, look, as a manager, leader, boss, whatever you want to call yourself, just taking responsibility and accountability, and not you know, not getting bogged down in what someone else has done to you, but really taking responsibility and leading from the front. It's really easy to be really reactive with some of your business decisions, but if you can make a conscious effort to go back to those business values that you spent so much time coming up with and hiring to and firing to, and really be guided by the business values and explain all your decisions in that context. Even if people don't necessarily like the decisions that you make, because it might mean that it has adverse impact on them, they'll tend to agree that those decisions are the right one for the business if you can always reference them back to the business values. Communicating with the team at least 5 times as often as you normally would, maybe 10 times as often sometimes. A favourite quote of mine from the basketball coach in the bottom right corner there is be quick but don't hurry, or act quickly but don't rush. So don't muck around, but make sure you've made the right decision in the first place. Good governance, look, it's important at all times. It's particularly important in a crisis. There's a temptation to cut corners, but good governance is critical. Be completely transparent with people, clients, referrers, staff. Sometimes it's easy to sort of want to hold on to the bad news, but I think ultimately, and there's always a balance between giving people so much information that they feel concerned, versus, you know, keeping in the dark and them not being concerned. But I think particularly it's important to be transparent, to speak to others effectively as you'd like to be spoken to. Don't underestimate the power of one negative influence. You've really got to get that message into everyone and make sure that everyone is singing from the same song sheet. And despite all of that, we're still making mistakes, but hopefully we're not repeating too many old ones. So I want to do a quick poll. So if you go to the chat and have a look, I think it's right up the very top of the chat because we were doing a little bit of a test earlier. I want you to have a bit of a think about what the biggest risks are in your organisation.
I'll just launch it again.
Oh, okay.
Chris, I think I can do that.
Jenny's the poll master.
Well, that doesn't look very good, does it?
Should we go to the one at the top?
Let me go try again. Recent poll. Where does it let me? Sorry, it's just going to take me a second.
That's all right. You guys just chat amongst yourselves. There we go. We're up. All right, so there's lots of options there. I want you to pick up to 5. So jump in and tick up to 5 boxes. Biggest risks to your organisation. You can do this too, Martin. We need the numbers. And you too, Lauren and Jenny.
I put mine in. I put them in 5 seconds. It was really easy.
Just give people another minute or so.
Oh, somebody can't do it because it's not available.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Had my fair share of continuity challenges with Teams over the years. All right, so if we look at what people are saying, I mean, there's a fair spread there, right? Cyber is a pretty consistent one. Psychological injury to staff, finding suitable staff in your area, suitably skilled and available staff, natural disasters, key person risk, someone leaving, falling ill, resigning, and cost-related or financial-related matters, so insufficient revenue and increased employment or other costs. So there's a fair spread there, as you'd expect across a spread of different organisations. So if we have a bit of a break from the poll for now, I just want people to reflect for a moment. So how did you assess those risks? When I said what are the biggest risks, how did you assess them? Did you have kind of a systematic process, or did you just do it by gut feel? And so I guess the initial reaction certainly is to do something by gut feel, but gut feel brings with it its own inherent biases. It's not the greatest way of managing risk. And so systematically is probably a good way to go. And so I want to use the rest of my presentation time to show you how we identify and manage some of those risks in a fairly systematic manner. It's something that we probably do every 2 or 3 months. We'd revisit our big risk and opportunity register document. And I think it's a pretty important part of good governance. It's definitely a key element to some important certifications like ISO 9001 or 27001 that are often prerequisites to working with bigger payers or winning larger contracts. So risk and opportunity register, and I apologise, there's going to be a few slides to come. Drag this window onto the biggest screen that you have. There's going to be a few slides to come that have some pretty small print. So essentially, it's a bit of a 6-step process. I'm going to take you through this. So number 1, list all the stuff that could go wrong and list your current controls. You know, yes, there are things that can go wrong invariably. You'll have a bunch of current controls already in place. Use the risk matrix, which I'm going to show you in a sec, to actually generate a rating. So you're getting away from gut feel and you're assessing, you know, what's the consequence on our organisation if this happened, and what's the likelihood of that happening and use that to generate a risk rating. Now, if you get a risk rating that's higher than you would like it to be, think about, well, what do I need to do to actually further reduce that risk, and then re-rate it. So you calculate your residual risk. You kind of just go through those processes again and again until you reach a residual risk level that allows you to sleep at night, essentially something that you're comfortable with. Whilst not forgetting, in step 3, you've identified some things that you need to do to reduce that risk. Well, you actually need to go and do them. So as far as the scores, just to provide a bit of context for the matrix that follows, so we've got a 1 to 25 scale essentially, and it's color-coded, low, medium, significant, and high. So here's where you're going to need a really big screen, so I apologize for this. But now this is one that we use. I actually borrowed this from a mining operation because it was an easy one that we could find that was sort of shared with us, and we're like, yeah, we can contextualize that to our organization. So working from the top, and I know this seems a bit complicated at the moment, but hear me out. I'm actually going to toggle kind of back and forth. So I'm going to go back one. Working from the top, we're going to pick our risk, okay? And we could say, so cyber was a common thread in the survey that we all just did, okay? And we go, well, with a cyber breach or a cyber incident, what sort of loss are we going to suffer, okay? Now, we've got 5 categories when it comes to the sort of losses that we could suffer. It could be harmed, and you can contextualize these to your own organization. We've got harm to people, client outcomes and impact on clients, financial losses, legal and regulatory impact, and then the impact on our reputation, social standing in the community. Now, if we had a cyber breach, fingers crossed, it's not going to result in our organization at least, it's not going to result in harm to people. Okay, because we're not running machines that keep people alive. It's definitely going to have an impact on client outcomes. It's going to have a financial impact. It's potentially going to have a legal and regulatory impact, and we're going to have to notify people. It's going to have a reputational impact as well. Now, if there's more than one impact, we're just going to pick the one with the highest rating. Okay, so we're going to go along, and we might decide that if we had a significant cyber breach, well, that could be high impact. It might not meet any of the criteria for a severe impact or severe consequence, I should say, but it may well meet a 4. Next, so we just remember that impact was a 4. Have a look at the likelihood, like how likely is this to actually happen? Okay, so rare, the tiny print there says it's never been known to occur in the business. It's highly unlikely that it'll occur within 20 years. Now, that's not the case. Like, we're repelling cyber attacks, daily, weekly. So for us in our business, we'd probably rate that either a 4 or a 5. Okay, so we're going to have a 4, 4, 21. Or a 4, 5, 23. In either case, it's going to be a high risk. Then we go to our register, and again, apologies about the small print. And this is really just a tabulated version of a big Excel spreadsheet. So we've got our risks down the left column. You can see cyber breach is the second one. How might that happen? There's a few ideas around how that could happen. Could be a disgruntled employee, human error, a ransomware hack, supply chain partner issue, any number of different issues. What are the domains of impact? What are our existing controls? So, yep, regular penetration testing, external IT provider, external infrastructure, training, certifications, backup, cyber insurance policy. It's pretty well controlled. We've rated a 4, 4, 21. It's still a high risk. Are we comfortable with it being a high risk? Well, we'd like for it to be lower. What else can we do? Well, we can align our operations with an elevated information security standard. We can identify additional continuing professional development for our tech people. We can utilize the services of an external consultant is required, and we should schedule some disaster recovery sessions. And we can re-rate that, make it a 4 to 14, okay, on the basis that if it happens, the impact is, the consequence is still going to be high, but with our additional controls in place, the likelihood of it happening becomes lower, moves our risk from high down to significant, and we just get to a point where, yep, we're comfortable with that, we're going to sit with that. Now, if the external environment changes such that our risk levels change, well, we're going to look at what we need to do. And so that's how we run our risk management. So it could, and I've just got a few examples here around, you know, something current to a lot of allied health professionals at the moment, the upcoming Fair Work Commission review of the Health Professional Support Services Award. You know, that's a risk. We've got consultants who drive 20,000 Ks a year plus each. You know, there's a risk of a fatigue incident, potentially a fatality driving a vehicle. The same as a lot of you identified, we've got key person risks. Now, the good thing about having all of this on a register is that, yeah, you do end up with a decent sized spreadsheet, but it's also all on the one page. It's a great opportunity to stop working sort of in the business and work on the business when you look at this, because it forces you to use your brain a little bit more strategically. Now, the opposite side of the risk coin is what about opportunities? So there's lots of time as well. We're like no different to a lot of you guys. Lots of clever people with lots of great ideas, but you can only pursue so many ideas at once. And so it's not difficult to invert the risk matrix essentially, and use that to manage your opportunities as well, which doesn't feel very entrepreneurial. I feel like opportunities management is meant to be this gut feel entrepreneurial approach, but there's no harm in making it a bit systematic. So use the same thing, use a matrix, identify, you know, an opportunity level. So, you know, a high opportunity is potentially transformational for the business, a significant opportunity a little bit less so. You know, a low opportunity level is something that's unlikely to deliver significant benefit, you know, and it shouldn't be pursued. So we can use the same matrix. We pick different sort of markers here. So yeah, we could look at how can we improve health and safety outcomes, how can we improve patient or customer experience, how can we improve staff experience, how can we improve financial performance, how can we improve our reputation or profile or community standing or social license or whatever it might be. And so when those ideas are developed by someone in management team or brought to us by staff members, we can get a bit of a scoping idea of that opportunity and almost throw it at that opportunity matrix and go, well, you know, what are the potential benefits of this opportunity? And then how does it stack up against, you know, other opportunities that we could pursue, because obviously we can only do so many. So things I really like about this approach, it forces you to have good governance habits and be systematic and not just driven by gut feel. There's massive space still for gut feel, and it shouldn't be discounted, but you've got to be able to back it up with a bit of data. As I said before, it forces you to think on the business rather than just in it. You're able to contextualize it to your business and its risks, and importantly, the opportunities as well, because you know, look, for us at least, and just speaking personally, managing the risks helps me sleep at night, but having a good pipeline of opportunities is what gets me out of bed excited in the morning, if that makes sense. Every time we do an audit, this process ticks off multiple requirements. I don't think we could have our various certifications without that process in place. And the big one too is that it's really easy to think about disasters or threats to continuity as things that happen really, really quickly, like a natural disaster. but there are also loads of things, including a bunch of the items that you guys identified in the poll, around key person risk, around financial sustainability, and a few others. There are disasters that creep up on you. One of my favourite quotes, it's from in a Ernest Hemingway book, and says, "How did you go bankrupt?" Bill asked. "Two ways," Mike said, "gradually and then suddenly," which is totally true. And I think, yeah, we need to keep an eye on that. We can have a continuity threat that creeps up on you. So just to finish, some key points. Look, health professionals, we're meant to be good at prevention. So logically, let's try and bring that message into other domains. Using a really systematic approach can be super helpful. Look, speaking personally, it's super helpful. Speak to people, learn from their mistakes. It's much cheaper than making them yourself. I think having that system again helps us because when the proverbial, as Martin said, really does hit the fan, it's good to fall back on a bit of structure rather than make emotional decisions. And that final key point of act quickly, but don't rush. Do anyone have any questions? For me or Martin, for that matter, if you've been pondering stuff from his slides.
We have got your cameras and microphones enabled. So if anyone wants to say anything or just type in a message, please do. Sounds like you guys might have covered everything very thoroughly. Lauren, did you want to add anything?
It looks like we have two typing in the chat.
Oh, lovely.
Yes.
Yep, thanks, Fiona. It's, yep, real life experience. I'd be happy to have a few less real life experiences over the next 5 years or so. But yeah, as they say, you sort of, you learn fastest when you're out of your comfort zone and drinking through a fire hose. So yeah, as long as you get a little bit of a break back in your comfort zone from time to time.
Yeah, great, Chris. It's really good hearing your perspective from the inside looking out, how you actually approach that. Super thorough. And, you know, from me, from a general business point of view, I'm always sort of has a, not quite a cookie cutter approach, but has a coverall sort of approach to it and trying to keep things simple. Sometimes simple doesn't do it. But certainly I've always got that in mind for businesses. So it's really good to see what it looks like from your point of view.
Yep, thanks again, Martin. I think, like I said, there's lots of crossover there. A lot of the continuity elements that you spoke about kind of get covered off almost in like a current control in our system. You know, so if I look at our risk register, then yeah, there would be something in there around, well, you know, where we are, we're probably not going to get flooded. You know, it's there, but it's low risk, and so we don't do anything with it. But we could certainly be without power for 5 days. That could happen. And so it's just, you know, for us sort of understanding, you know, what do we have in place to cover that? You know, where do we keep all the key documents? Does everyone know where those key documents are kept on SharePoint and so on?
Yeah, I think
following
that's
a
a
similar
good
process.
point. Yeah, the access to there's no point in having a plan sitting on the shelf in an office if you're surrounded by floodwater. So it's good to have something you can actually have soft versions, so you can actually activate straight away and remotely if you need to. It's a good point.
Yeah,
I think just across, you're mentioning cyber a bit, and I don't want to sort of take us away from the participants, but data in general and data security, which can be impacted by cyber or hacks, but also power drops, anything like that can sort of take out a server. You know, I mean, in the allied health space, data has got to be incredibly valuable, both from a currency point of view and a security and safety point of view for privacy. So is that something that you super focus on?
Yeah, well, look, it is, and because part of our business is actually developing software. So we, develop and sell software as a service to some organisations, and some of our clients are like they're large health insurers, they're utilities that are connected to the national grid, like they've got significant data security requirements. And so, so we have to have an awful lot in place to ensure that we comply with those requirements. And that means, using, Australian-based servers and
data sovereignty.
I'm not, and I'm not the person to speak at length on it. I'll just hand that off to the CTO every day of the week. But particularly having that 27001 certification, that's a bit of a cover-all on a solid system. But it also means that we probably, like our cyber insurance policy limit of liability, I think, is $10 million. Which it doesn't cost us 10 million for the policy. Obviously, the policy is not that expensive, but we've got significant insurance policy on it as well because of the scale that some of our customers operate at, and the potential impact of a hack on them. We don't want to be the people that were responsible for an Optus or Medibank level hack. Oh, Jenny, you're just on mute.
On mute. Thank you so much for your presentations today. We will put a copy of this recording in our library and a PDF version of the presentations. And don't forget to fill in the evaluation, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.